How's it going, everybody? So this season brought us a new map, which sadly is only in use for duels and brawls, but other than that, an absolutely stunning one. I really love the aesthetics of it. And on top of that, we also got a few changes for Dominion maps, as well as a spawn location fix for Sentinel in brawls to emphasize actual team combat instead of two separate duels. I've gone over the most important ones in my patch rundown video, so if you haven't seen that one, feel free to check it out after this video. Now, when you saw the thumbnail and video title, you might have immediately thought that I'm going to mostly talk about environmental hazards and instant kills. I've done that plenty in the past, and I think that they do have their place, and For Honor as a game has always had them, and I think they are an integral part that will probably never be completely removed. They do have their place, and as we can see, they are being reduced gradually. If you compare what we have now to, let's say, dual spawn points when the game first came out, and we've come so far. Let me just remind you about the forest bridge, for example. We also have maps for rank that pretty much only offer walls as a form of interactable environment. No spikes, fire, or ledges at all. I think we've come a long way since then. I also don't really want to talk about specific maps, Gauntlet, Beachhead, Forge, and God knows how many more maps we have that suffer from major flaws. I don't know how maps are being designed by Ubisoft in which order, but let's take Beachhead as an example. The idea of having ships land on a beach at an already breached wall is really cool, but this also limits what can be done gameplay-wise. And I'm aware that I'm always preaching balance should come first, but not every single map needs to be completely viable in a competitive sense. It would be nice if it was so, but some gimmicky ones will obviously make their way in, and it's totally fine to have these as well. So instead, I want to talk about three main problems that can and do plague pretty much every single map in some form. I've briefly mentioned these in the past, and I had some pushback from community members bringing up realism. So please, it's a game. Realism will always play second, or rather third fiddle to gameplay, as well as fun. But alright, first major problem. Tiny, narrow entrance points to capture zones that can easily be blocked off by a single person. As it stands right now, the only solid way of getting on a point is if your character has a bash, basically removing the obstacle in your way. Which, on the other hand, makes it rather easy for the person blocking the entrance to predict what's coming. But Freeze, this is just how castles were built. Let me repeat, we're playing a fantasy game where random cultures fight each other, so accurate, realistic castle architecture is completely irrelevant for map design. No one will complain if a door is 4 meters wide instead of 2. I bring this up specifically because the Gauntlet changes are exactly that. They moved one tiny entrance and made 2 tiny entrances instead, all the while widening the old entrance. It's like they understand that small doors are a pain to fight around, but at the same time are adamant about letting people easily block off point entrances. But hear me out. Does this sort of tactic actually have a place in the game? Because it does offer a tactical advantage to keep someone off a zone so your team can generate more points. And yes, absolutely, I do agree here, but it needs to be done right. I'll give you an example of a map where this is done quite well and my thought process behind it. Citadel Gate A point, the home point of the attacker team. This is a map where you can clearly say that a point belongs to a specific team. And that point actually reflects that when looking at how the attacker can enter the point and contest the zone. When you come from spawn, you have 2 choices on where to enter the point, and while an opponent can block one path, you have a shorter route to the second path compared to them. They can't rotate on the point fast enough to block you from entering. I think this is a good reflection of the made-up home point allocation, as well as offering the possibility to still block it off if you have 2 people on the point. On the other side of the point, it's different, as that one is usually taken by the defending team. This might be a bit confusing on how I use attacker and defender in this scenario. I'm talking about attackers and defender in the team mode, not in the sense of the point itself. So both the path over the wooden bridge as well as the staircase only offer one entrance point, which can be blocked off again. Like I said at the beginning, I do not agree with this being the absolute standard as it is now, but this point at least makes sense when you think about it from a balance perspective and why one side is different compared to the other. Whether this was actually thought out or pure coincidence, I can't tell, but at least you do have some options when trying to get on this point. Now let's take a bad example. The recently reworked Sentinel. The C point is pretty much only accessible through the drawbridge, which opens you up to being shot by the ballista. The two side entrances that lead to the respective spawn points are as terrible as it gets. Stairs leading up, which fuck with your camera, then long and narrow as well, which makes it stupidly easy to be blocked off. And then the A point suffers from the same if you choose to go through the ballistas. There are actually two possibilities to block someone, as it's two doorways. The back entrance got widened, but when defending the point, it's still easier for me to get to the stairs and attack you before you get even close enough to enter the point. You can look at pretty much any point on any Dominion map and see that it's usually the point defender that can easily abuse this. I personally think that this isn't a very fun interaction, and I'd rather actually fight the player than fight the map architecture. Then go fight somewhere else. You can't ignore the point. The point is a major objective of the game mode. Going somewhere else is detrimental to me trying to win the match. So, but what if I actually made it onto the point? Next problem, stalling, or rather how easy it is to do on some points that have a pillar, cauldron, or whatever else in the middle of it. Stalling is a proper tactic and useful when communicated to your teammates. You stop your opponents from gaining points and keep them busy, which allows your friends to either come in as reinforcements or they take the time to accomplish other things on the map. It doesn't always have to be a big objective that you're after. It can be a simple thing as you being out of stamina and avoiding the possible pressure that can't reach you because a pillar is in between you and your opponent, which results in them bashing and hitting and bouncing off. The problem is that there is a huge discrepancy between heroes in terms of being able to do as well as punish this. Side dodge distance, undodgeable attacks, attacks with lots of forward tracking, or even detrimental things like huge hitboxes that constantly make your weapon collide with the environment. All that can make this a frustrating experience. This brings me back to the issue that we all would prefer to rather fight the player than struggle with interactions caused by map design. I know that this tilts players because every time I show something like this in a video, I get lots of comments. Doesn't matter whether I do it or if it's being done to me. People do not enjoy this. And while it might be effective and serve a purpose, most people hate it when it happens to them. And the last point I want to bring up ties into the previous one, having an actual place to fight. And by that I mean on the actual objective. It should be clear to everyone that the objective is where the actual fighting should happen. Don't fight just for the sake of it. But a lot of points are restricted, be that by ledges or drop attacks or spikes or whatever else environmental hazard. This forces a lot of fights to little corners, which then, once again, leads to lots of weapon collisions with walls. I understand that this is insanely difficult to balance if you want to keep specific things. Oh look, it's another completely flat and totally square capture point. That's obviously not the goal, but that is also just the other extreme in that scenario. Having a 100 square meter point, but to actually fight, you can only use 20 square meters, or otherwise you'd run into issues or risk being instant killed. Zone sizes vary, and so do their locations in terms of elevation and other map features. This last point is extremely hard to even tackle, as everyone will emphasize other things when it comes to balance, as well as aesthetics of the map itself. It will also take a lot of actual in-game time to figure out whether something works as intended, or is a complete dud. All in all, I'm happy that they're reworking maps, even if it's small and sometimes totally useless changes, but I might also be misjudging them, and after a while we figure out that it had a bigger impact than initially anticipated. Nevertheless, the issues presented in this video do exist, and some of them aren't even that hard to fix. Let me know what you think. I'm sure everyone has a favourite and least favourite map, whatever the reasons might be. I hope the video was interesting. Thanks for watching. Laters everybody.